So we're looking at the multicolored cards. So our first few cards. So these are the ones that are basically, especially when it comes to the uncommons. These are the ones that are really going to inform what each color pair is trying to do in its respective colors, and really kind of shape the way that the draft goes there. Sagas are also ridiculously fun. Sagas are honestly, I think, probably the best design in Magic in like the last 10 years or something. Like they're just really, really flavorful. They're fun because there's like this anticipation that comes from like, oh man, next chapter is going to be sweet. They're not too good because they you got to measure it out. You don't get it all at once. They tell a really nice story. They also from an art perspective, they allow artists to draw in a very different way than they would usually draw because it's a vertical aspect ratio frame as opposed to the usual landscape frame, so they can draw differently. It also like sagas, often by their nature allow artists to like experiment with art styles, which I'll point out in a little bit because it's kind of cool. But yeah, no, sagas are great. Sagas are really, really fun and really, really flavorful. Okay, so our first gold card, not a saga, is Agar the Freezing Flame. So he is a legendary creature giant wizard. There's a cycle of 10 uncommon, tribally relevant legends in this in the gold cards. So this is our our blue-red giant legendary creature. So 3 out of 3/3, already a totally good rate. Notably, most of the gold cards are going to be better than the average non-gold card because the design philosophy is always that gold cards are a little bit harder to cast, so they give you more once you've actually managed to cast them. So yes, we've got a 3-mana 3/3, and it says that whenever a creature or planeswalker an opponent controls is dealt excess damage, if a giant, wizard, or spell you control dealt damage to it, draw a card. So pretty much, let's say that my opponent has a 2/2, and I attack my 3/3, and they block. I am dealing excess damage to that 2/2, right? Because I only needed 2 damage to kill the 2/2, but I had 3. And so as a result, I get to draw a card from that happening. If my opponent has a 2/2 and I cast a lightning bolt at it, right? I deal 3 damage. It's overkill damage. I get to draw a card from that. So this is a potentially very powerful effect if you are able to consistently guarantee the overkill ability on damage spells. I don't know. I think this actually makes for a very interesting brawl deck. I genuinely will be curious to see if this brawl deck has legs. Because Giant Wizard or Spell does give you a reasonably reasonable range. A reasonable range of possible ways to trigger that effect. It's not like most of the giant cards that literally only want you to do giant things. This also lets you do spell things and wizard things. So it's much, much better in that way, I believe. I think this is a really cool card. Time will tell how good it actually is. Like, this might even be a good card for Commander, like actual Commander. There are definitely a lot of uncommon commanders in the past that have made the jump to being just legitimately very good in EDH. Looking at you, like Slimefoot, Tetiova, these are all like all-star commanders that are uncommons. And this one definitely could do that. It just really depends on what the support suite looks like for it. The fact that it lets you do it in wizards means I can play this in like just straight up tribal wizards, which is a lot less restricted than tribal giants, and still reap all of those same benefits, which I think is really cool. So it's not just pigeonholed into straight up giant tribal, though you can definitely do that if you want. That's cool too. But I do think that wizards is going to have better support for it overall, and I think that's really cool. So yeah, this card seems great and definitely a pretty solid place to start a draft. Like, there are quite a few of the rares that we've gone over so far that I would not like, that I would pick this over, just because yes, you're committing to a tribe, but with these kind of cards it's cool too, because if you commit to this kind of thing early, you can really start drafting around it and forming like a really cool cohesive game plan, which is, as you've seen when I draft the Tinkerer's Cube a bunch, exactly what I like to be doing, which is basically drafting a plan as opposed to just sort of drafting generically good stuff. On to our first saga, Arnie Slays the Troll. So this is actually a reference, I realized, to... here, I'm going to jump up a little bit. Oh, God. I'm going to jump up a touch up to here. So this is the saga. So his flavor text says, I headbutted a troll and won. So this is basically the saga of how Arnie did that, pretty much, which I think is really cool. Somebody pointed out to me that this card is funny because it's basically just time delayed... there's the green kicker spell from from Zendikar, the most recent set. So the first mode is target creature you control fights a target creature you don't control. The second mode is add a red, put 2+1/+1 counters on up to one target creature you control. And then the final one is you gain life equal to the greatest power among creatures you control. Now, if you ask me, personally, I think that these two modes should have been swapped. It makes more sense to me to put the counters on a creature before it then goes to fight another creature. The flip side of that is that it's nice because you get the fight effect out of this immediately, rather than giving your opponent a turn to like brace for it. Basically, if it was the second chapter, so there's a give and a take there. It could have been either way, and it would be better and worse for different reasons. But it is funny because it is. Oh my god, I'm trying to remember what the name of the card is because it's gonna really bother me that I can't remember this. What's the name of this card? Whatever. Cam, if you remember the name of that card, I will be eternally grateful, but it's not a big deal if you don't. Anyway, good card, I believe, especially at uncommon. This was interesting because it definitely isn't really a signpost card. It's just like a good card to have if you're in those colors. The green kicker spell that has multiple modes from Zendikar Rising. There was a black one, a green one, and a blue one, and I don't remember the names of them. They all were like something of something, but I forget what that like keyword was. Inscription. Thank you, Emilio. Also, welcome, Emilio. Inscription of Abundance. Yeah. So I just want to actually show this off because I think it's kind of funny. So Inscription of Abundance has 3 modes, and if you kick the spell for 5 mana, you get to choose all 3. Put 2+1/+1 counters on target creature. Target creature you control fights target creature you don't control. Target player gains X life, where X is the greatest power among creatures they control. So it's really just a really weird, time-delayed Inscription of Abundance, which is super strange. It's just strange. It's just really strange. I find it funny that they basically created 2 spells back-to-back. One of them is rare and like quite good, honestly, and then this one is like a time-delayed Gruul version of the same thing, but at uncommon, granted. Frosty31, welcome to the stream. I'm trying to remember if I've seen you in the stream before. You're not one of my regulars, but either way, you are more than welcome. Yes, the blue abundance was of insight. That is true. So yeah, I think this card is sweet. Yeah, once before. The name rang a bell, but I wasn't 100% sure, and I didn't want to assume. But welcome back in that case. Definitely possible. Yeah, we're nearing the end of my oral set review of the new Kaldheim set. We just started the multicolor cards, so we have all of those left plus the artifacts. So stick around if that sounds interesting. I'm also going to be putting up VODs of all of them. I've got them sort of chunked into their colors for bite-size purposes, so you can feel free to watch those on as a highlight later on. And I'm working on getting them onto YouTube, but I haven't quite figured out YouTube yet. Twitch is already like a lot. Anywho, next one is another the black, white, gold signpost card. So this one is Ascent of the Worthy. So the first 2 modes actually both do the same thing. So choose a creature you control. Until your next turn, all damage that will be dealt to creatures you control is dealt to that creature instead. So if anyone's ever heard of the card Pariah, this basically pariahs a specific creature. So only one creature takes any and all damage. And obviously, if you can find a way to prevent the damage to that creature or make it indestructible or whatever, then you actually just have a sweet lightning rod that'll never go away. I don't exactly know how good that effect actually is. This I'm going to need to see play out. I really just don't know what the use case for this card is. But then the final card is return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield with flying counter on it. That creature is an angel warrior in addition to other types. So the synergy here is that one or both of the creatures that you made into pariahs on the first 2 modes, you then get to reanimate one of those because it's presumably died from taking 1,000 damage or whatever, and it comes back. So it can be cool to like play this on a creature that has like a neat ETB ability where it ETBs, it does its thing, then you make it take some damage so that nothing else has to take damage, and then you get to buy it back again and ETB it. This is PV's card? He's not even on it though. Like Javier actually had himself on the night. This doesn't look like PV at all. That's weird to me. That's kind of cool though, if it is. Anyway, decent card. Basically, like a lot, like sort of buys you a lot of time in a position where you're under pressure, and then eventually lets you rebuy a dead creature, hopefully with an ETB to take advantage of. All right. Next one is Battle for Brettagard. So interestingly enough, this is actually also a story spotlight in addition to being a saga. I assume this is like somewhere near the conclusion, because I know that there's like a big cataclysm that happens and everybody has to fight for the mortal realm. So mode 1 is make a 1/1 human warrior. Mode 2, make a 1/1 green elf. And this is the idea is like the elves and the humans are joining forces to fight against the invading people from like other realms. And then the last mode is choose any number of artifact tokens and or creature tokens you control with different names, and then for each of them create a token that's a copy of it. So it basically like super populates for your turn. And obviously, hopefully you've managed to hang on to these 2 creature tokens, and at the very least this card will give you an extra of both of those, along with whatever other tokens you've managed to accrue. I don't really think this card is honestly that good in limited. Like, it feels pretty underwhelming to just like make 2 1/1s over 2 turns and then like maybe double them up if they haven't died to God knows what somehow. But I do think this is a cool card for constructed. I think there's a lot of ways of making this. I mean, again, there are a lot of token decks that you can build in. Sorry, Frosty, for the since you weren't here for the rest of the stream, I'm saying, well, this set review, I'm very much looking at it from a limited perspective and then from an EDH/brawl perspective. I'm not really looking at at these cards' application to like standard, modern, whatever, because they're just not formats that I play very much of, and therefore not formats that I have very much confidence making declarations about. I don't love this being good and limited. I just think that it does too little and not fast enough, basically. Like 2 1/1s over 2 turns is just like not very exciting. But again, I do think that there are EDH decks and brawl decks where the tokens will matter and where you can kind of take better advantage of those token synergies. Basically, if you can build around this card, it's a lot more interesting than if it's just a random card in your deck. Especially because one cares about one kind of synergy and one cares about a different kind of synergy. So as much as I think this card is really cool, I don't think it's a card that you really want to be picking up in limited, even though it is a rare. I would honestly probably pass this for like a lot of uncommons and commons in the set from what I've seen so far. Next one we have is Battle of Frost and Fire. This is a 5-mana saga. It's a red-blue one. Battle of Frost and Fire. So again, red-blue are the giant colors. So Battle of Frost and Fire deals 4 damage to each non-giant creature and each planeswalker. So basically, your giants are fine, but it wrecks everything else of yours and theirs that meets the non-giant criteria. Not bad. Like, it's basically a 5-mana Storm's Wrath that doesn't kill your giants, which is not bad, honestly. Like, I think that's actually a pretty solid little card, especially if you are actually playing tribal giants. Like, if I was playing this as a brawl deck or something, like, this is definitely going in there for sure. At least if I made a giant tribal and not wizard tribal. The chapter 2 is Scry 3. It's not like the most impactful thing, but you do, because notably chapter 2 triggers after your draw step. Like and so it'd be cooler if it was an upkeep thing because you could scry 3 and then draw. So really it's setting your draw up for the 3rd turn that you get it, which is whenever you cast a spell with converted mana cost 5 or greater this turn, draw 2 cards, then discard a card. So in theory, the scry helps you set up so that you can potentially find a card that meets this criteria so that you can then get the draw 2, discard 1. It's not amazing, but it is pretty solid. Like, the fact that the 5-mana, it's like a 5-mana, like, non-giant Wrath is already probably good, so the rest is mostly gravy. And I do think that makes it worthwhile overall. Wraths and Limited are generally pretty strong. Obviously, if you're playing against somebody playing Blue-Red Giants, board this out. It's not going to help you very much, but otherwise it's definitely playable, and I would very strongly be considering first picking it. First picking gold cards obviously comes with a risk, but I do think that this is a gold card that would be worth first picking, most likely. Yeah, it is extremely reminiscent of Relbacolic Giant. You've got that absolutely right. All right, the Bears of Litiara. So 3 mana to make a 2/2 blue shapeshifter creature token with Changeling. That's your first mode. The second mode is any number of target shapeshifter creatures you control have base power toughness 4/4. Now, Cam, I believe it might have been you that was mentioning the fact that this is a bit of an obnoxious ability, mostly because of the memory issues that you're going to encounter, because this isn't until end of turn. It just makes it 4/4. It just makes your shapeshifters 4/4 forever. The blue instant is a memory nightmare. You missed me talking about that, but that card is complicated, and I barely even want to talk about it because it's just like I don't even want to talk about what this card actually does. It's confusing. You're right. At least this one is confusing. The other one is nonsense. The other one is a headache waiting to happen. It is a cool card, and so is this, but a headache nonetheless. So basically, you make a 2/2 shapeshifter, and then on the next turn, if your 2/2 is still around, it's now just permanently a 4/4, along with any other shapeshifter you happen to have. And then you just have to remember that they're all base 4/4s. Like, that's just a thing. Whether or not this card goes away, they're just 4/4s, which is a little weird, but whatever. It is good. Like, it's upgrading your creatures to 4/4s. That is cool. And then the last mode is choose up to one target creature or planeswalker. Each creature with power 4 or greater. Haha, you turned all your creatures into 4/4s. See how this is going. Deals damage equal to its power to that permanent. So basically, one thing, basically just fuck that thing in particular is where we're at with that. All your 4 power creatures just punch the poor planeswalker or creature that was designated. This card I think is very good. As a side note, like, this is actually just a genuinely good card. A 3-mana 2/2 is obviously not incredible. There's a bit of a banding element to that. I can see that. 3-mana 2/2 is obviously not a particularly strong card, but the subsequent abilities and the fact you're presumably, hopefully, in blue-green and therefore playing a changeling deck means that you're going to reap more benefits out of the second chapter and then even more benefits out of the third chapter. So again, if you're building around this, like, this is a very good card. And even by itself, it's not that bad. It's just not incredible if it's like your only changeling is that one. Binding of the Old Gods may actually be my favorite card in the entire set. I might eat those words, but it's definitely my favorite uncommon. This card is amazing. This card is ridiculous. So first and foremost, this card sets a really interesting precedent of being the first card, I believe, that is not actually art, but photography. Sorry, and that's not to say that photography is not art, because I genuinely believe that it is. But it's not like studio art. It's not a painted or a digitally rendered medium. This is actually a hand-carved wooden cutout that was then photographed and altered in post for this, which is really freaking cool. Oh yeah, there's a ton of changelings in Kaldheim. You'll see this in a minute actually, but the blue-black tribal mechanic is literally changeling. Like blue-green is changeling. That's the tribe for blue-green, which is to say they're everybody's tribe. It's pretty cool. This card is sick though. Like, really cool art technique aside and everything, and the fact that I think, like I said, is the first time photography was actually used on a Magic card. The card itself is just obscene. So it's 4 mana. It's in Golgari. The first mode is literally just Vindicate, basically, which is absurd. The first mode is just destroy target non-land permanent. Full stop. That's it. 4 mana, blow a thing up. It's just good, and it doesn't even care what it is. It's not just a creature. It's not just an artifact. You can kill a planeswalker. You can kill an artifact, an enchantment, whatever. Just blow it up. It's gone. That's ridiculous. The second mode is then search your library for a forest card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, and shuffle your library. So we finally got our rampant growth / Farseek style of effect. Notably, this doesn't say a basic forest card. So this is also mana fixing, because you can go get a Triome with this or something. As long as it has forest as part of its types in the Triome. Like, this card is really good. I'm super, super impressed with it. I'm definitely going to be shoehorning it into a couple of my EDH decks. I think this card has a ton of... Oh yeah, you're thinking Assassin's Trophy. And yes, definitely very reminiscent of that. Notably, Trophy does get to target lands as well, and it's a 2-mana instant. But that card's also a rare, right? This is an uncommon with an effect that is, like, on par with that. Which just, again, continues to amaze me. Again, like I said, then so you get to do some ramping, and then the last mode is kind of just not that good, but it doesn't really matter because the first 2 modes are so good that the third mode is just gravy anyway. So creatures you control gain death touch until end of turn. That may be good, it may not be good, but again, this is the kind of card that I would pick up over a lot of the rares in the set. It's just very powerful, very versatile, and I do believe that this card is good enough for Brawl, for EDH, etc. And it's definitely good enough for Limited. Like, this is a very first pickable card. Yeah, a little bit. All right, so we got the Bloodsky Massacre next. 3 mana. Chapter 1 is create a 2/3 red demon berserker token with menace. So at its base, this is effectively a 3 mana 2/3 menace, which is not bad. Like, that is honestly a pretty reasonable rate. It's not a good rate. Like, if that was the card by itself, it would not be a rare. But of course, there is more. Um, Next chapter, whenever a berserker, including obviously the one that you just created, attacks, you draw a card and lose a life. So if you have multiple berserkers out, you're going to get to draw several cards, gas back up. Yes, you'll lose a bit of life, but we all know it's okay to trade cards for life. Like, that's a valuable exchange. And the final mode is add a red for each berserker you control. Again, ideally you've got more than just the one, but even then, at least it's one. Then until end of turn, you don't lose this mana as phases and steps end. So basically, it just rituals you at the end of that, meaning you can kind of have like a bit of like an extra oomphy turn, depending on what your mana situation is like and what your berserker situation is like. I don't think this card is incredible. It's not terrible by any means, but I don't think it's a particularly high pick. Like, this is not the kind of card that I'm trying to put myself deliberately into two colors for. Like, I legitimately believe that this uncommon is better than this rare, just as a side note. It's decent. It's not bad. If I was already in these colors, I'd be very happy to have it. But yeah, I'm not trying to first pick this card, probably. It might just be the pick depending on how bad your pack is, but there are a lot of single color uncommons and even commons that I would likely pick over this. But it's fine. You just got to, like I said, it's always the tricky thing with the gold cards is, do you commit to two colors right off the bat? Usually you really want the card to be strong enough to pay yourself off for that, and I feel like this one just doesn't quite get there. Like, a gold Wrath, I think, is a good enough reason to go into two colors. A gold removal spell, probably a decent reason to go to two colors. A gold 2/3, not really that good. So I don't know. I'm not terribly excited. This feels very constructed playable to me, but again, I'm not going to try to speculate too hard on that because I just don't know enough. All right, Follow the Imposter, 3 mana. Put a +1/+1 counter on up to one target creature. So that's the first 2 chapters. So for 3, you get to put 1 counter right away, and then the next turn you get to put yet another counter. And then on the last one, you exile a creature with the greatest power among creatures target opponent controls. So this is actually quite interesting because you can use this in a couple of ways, right? You can either deliberately pump up your opponent's creature. Rowan games is I think what you're talking about. I think you're thinking the first the Rowan games is I'm guessing what you mean. And I can see the comparison there. So yeah, you can either build your own creature up and then just hit their biggest creature. Or what you can do is you can actually deliberately build up your opponent's creature, because it does say target creature, not target creature you control, which is a bit risky because obviously they might attack you with that now larger creature and that could be bad. But it means that you can if they have like a 3/3 that's like got a really bad like annoying ability on it, and then they have a 4/4. The problem is that when this comes around, you're going to have to kill the 4/4, right? You don't actually get the choice of killing the 3/3 because it says the greatest power. But if you give it a +1/+1 counter, and now they're both 4/4s, you get to choose the one that you want between the two because they're both meeting the criteria, which I think is a very interesting little bit of like interplay that opens itself up there. So again, not a super, super high pick, I don't think, especially because you have to wait 3 turns for the removal spell aspect of it. Whereas like this one where you get it on turn 1, this one you get it on turn 1, this one you get it on turn 1. Like, these are all better because they're actually removal spells with upside, whereas this is like an engine card with the upside of being a removal spell. Again, not something I'm going to try to go into these colors for, but definitely 100% a good card if you're already in these colors. And that's always going to be like the distinction to make on these gold cards is some of them are good if you're already those colors, some of them are worth being those colors only on the back of that alone. Yeah, Soul Shadow is a good comparison there. All right, Firia. I want to say it's Firia. Judge of Valor. So I'm a little bit sad about this card. This card probably should cost 1 less colorless. I think if this cost 1 white, black, and if it was a 2/4 flying lifelink, it would be a lot more playable. As it is, 5 for a 2/4 flying lifelink is like, kind of medium. And then of course, because the second spell tribal is what the white-black color pair is trying to do in this set. Obviously, it's got an angel sub-theme. She is, of course, an angel and a cleric. But the second spell thing is like the actual like shtick for that color pair. So this one says, whenever you cast your second spell each turn, look at the top 3 cards of your library, put 1 of them in your hand and the rest in your graveyard. First of all, this ability is really weird on a white-black card. This ability is literally a blue ability. Like, there are a number of blue cards that just do that. Strategic Planning, which is in this set, literally being one of them. So I'm really weirded out by the fact that there's just a blatantly blue ability on a white and black card. Like, that's some, like, Sarah Angel is a Golgari card tier nonsense. And again, I think the body is just overcosted for what she is. Like 5 for a 2/4 flying lightning just doesn't feel like it does enough. So I'm not a big fan of this card, and I definitely would not be trying to force this. Now, on the other hand, and speaking of Sarah Angels, Furia's Retribution is a ridiculous card. So this is a 4 mana. This is at base a 4 mana 4/4 flying vigilance. That's just what this card is. It's a 4 mana 4/4 flying vigilance. That's just already very good. Already just very good. In addition to that, on the following turn, your angels gain tap to destroy target creature with power less than this creature's power. Notably, because this angel also has vigilance, it means that on that turn where this goes off, you get to first attack with your at least one, and maybe if you're lucky, more than one angel with vigilance, because there are other cards that make 4/4 angel tokens with vigilance. And then after getting in for your 4 damage, you then get to tap and kill one of their creatures, which is like very silly. Or even before, like if you can attack into their flyer, and then after you've declared your attack, but before you deal the damage, you get to tap it. It's still attacking because you declared it as a legal attacker. Clear the other flyer out of the way and get in for your damage. So like this card, and then the last one, because already like that wasn't good enough. Angels you control gain double strike till end of turn. So again, if your 4/4 angel is still chilling, it is now an 8/4 angel until the end of turn. So like this is gonna kill your opponent real fast, and this is an absolute bomb. This is like actually probably one of the better rares in the set, despite being uncommon or gold. I mean, like this is the kind of card you first pick, and you're like, all right, I'm in. Like, let's be white black angels, let's go, because like this pays you for being white black. You get a good creature, and both of the subsequent chapters are good, synergistic, and powerful. So I'm a fan. I'm a fan. All right, next one is Forging the Tearite Sword. So for 3 mana, you create a treasure token on chapters 1 and 2. Fine, not that exciting. Third chapter, search your library for a card named Halvar, God of Battle, or an equipment card. Reveal it and put it in your hand. Yes, Retribution actually can kill Firia herself. That's true. That is an interesting interaction. Maybe not the most flavorful thing I've ever seen. I'm actually kind of surprised now that I think about it. This is another way they could have fixed her. Instead of making her cheaper, if they made her a 5 mana 4/4 flying lifelink, that would have also been fine, I think. Although that might have actually been too good, because a 4/4 flying lifelink for 5 is actually like some Baneslayer tier stuff, which is like pretty good. But anyway, another nod they could have turned that they didn't. Sadly, this card just winds up being not great as a result, in my opinion. Anyway, back to the Tearite Sword. I don't think you're ever playing this in your deck. It just doesn't do enough. Randomly making tokens is cute, but not great. And then, like, if you got real lucky and opened Halvar, God of Battle, like, good job, you have a sweet bomb mythic. I guess go find it. Like, I will play this in 100% of my decks that have Halvar in it, and in 0% of my other decks. That is exactly how this card works. Sorry, I don't know if anyone heard that, but my partner is playing Dead by Daylight and getting very spooked. Because there are no equipment cards out in this set that are worth waiting 3 turns to do this. It's just not that good. It's just not that good. So pass on that one. All right, Harald, King of Skemfar. This is the elf legend that sort of ties together the green-black elf theme. So Harald, King of Skemfar. So he's a 3 mana 3/2 menace. When he enters the battlefield, you look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal an elf, warrior, or Tivar card. There is only one Tivar card. It is this one. Again, lucky you if you actually have a Tivar card to go look for. That is pretty sweet. Especially because they curve into each other too, right? You go turn 3, Herald, find your Tivar. Turn 4, cast Tivar. Oh, it's pretty good shit. If you do that, congratulations, you're living the dream. Otherwise, though, I don't love it. Like, a 3 mana 3/2 menace is like, it's a fine body. Like, again, if you're in black-green, you're going to play this because you're probably an elf deck. But this is not the kind of card that I would pick early and try to be black-green for. Like, again, the other one I would, the removal spell one I would. This one is kind of like, all right, I'm doing the elf thing. I'll pick up a Herald. It's like, you know, pack 2, pick 5 or something, and you just grab it because it's like, it works. But you're not trying to force it based on this. Next one is very complementary to it. Herald unites the elves. So again, this is the whole notion of like bringing the green elves and the black elves together. Mill 3 cards. You may put an elf or Tivar. Once again, doing Tivar things. From your graveyard onto the battlefield. That actually is pretty powerful. The milling, like the fact that they go directly to the battlefield from being milled is actually just legitimately very strong. If you have a critical mass of elves and or Tivars in your deck, this is definitely worth it. That being said, again, this is a rare, so again, congratulations if you have this and Tivar in the same sealed pool or whatever. You did it. Putting a 1/1 counter on each elf you control, again, is powerful. Like, there's a lot of, like, this all comes obviously with the caveat of, like, you're playing an elf deck and you have some sort of critical mass of elves, because this doesn't do much on Chapter 2 if you have, like, one elf. Like, congrats, you got a counter, I guess. And then the last chapter is whenever an elf you control attacks this turn, target creature and opponent control gets -1/-1. So obviously, the more elves you're attacking with, and they're all in theory much bigger because of the +1/+1 counters, you can like team up those elves to like take down a larger creature. So like if I attack with 3 elves and my opponent is a 3/3 blocker, my elves are all 2/2s, and they all attack, and it's like it goes trigger, 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 and then it goes -1, -1, -1, kills the 3/3, and now you're getting in for 6, and they don't have a blocker anymore, which is like a pretty powerful turn. So again, this one is weird because this one actually is. This one strikes me as the kind of card you would want to pick early because you really want to be able to build around this to maximize it. And I think that the upside on this card is strong enough that it's worth. Yeah, Massacre Girl definitely some shades of Massacre Girl there for sure. Although notably does not wipe your own board. But yeah, no. So the bottom line being that like this actually feels like a build around. It is a very specific build around. Like you need to build a very specific deck for it. But if that deck comes together, this is a very powerful piece of that deck. I just again don't know if the elf deck is actually good. And how good this card is going to basically be, and whether or not it's first pickable, is 100% going to be reliant on whether or not the elf deck is a real deck in Limited. All right, our next card is undeniably very powerful. This is the Immersturm Predator. It is a 4-mana 3/3 flyer. It has whenever it becomes tapped, and this is for any reason. Obviously, the easiest and most common way will be by attacking. But this says whenever it becomes tapped, exile up to 1 target card from a graveyard. So it doesn't need to be a creature card. It doesn't need to be your graveyard. Just like eat something out of a yard and put a +1/+1 counter on this. That's pretty powerful. So this basically already attacks as a 4/4, assuming you or your opponent have anything in their graveyards. And I would say that it's definitely worth exiling your own things if your opponent's graveyard is somehow empty, because the upside of giving a +1/+1 counter to this is totally worth losing some random card from your yard. And then the final mode is sack another creature. This gains indestructible until end of turn and tap it. Now, notably, that ability does synergize with this. So the act of tapping it to give it indestructible will also prompt you to exile a card from a card from a graveyard and gain indestructible. And because you sacked a creature, presumably that creature is in your yard. So at the very least, you have that one. To exile. Now, notably, if your dragon is already tapped and you activate this ability, it will not become tapped a second time. So you won't get to activate the ability, you won't get to trigger this ability a second time. But it is a sweet way to kind of give your dragon, like make your dragon hard to kill while growing it progressively as you go. This is a very, very strong card and definitely first pickable. Like this is a bomb for sure. All right, our next card is Invasion of the Giant. So this is our uncommon saga for the blue red pair. So this is 2 mana with an ETB Scry 2. Not bad. 2 mana Scry 2, not exactly amazing, but it's okay. Let's see what else it does. Draw a card. Okay, not bad either. The Scry 2 presumably helped set you up because you drew your card for turn and then you draw a second card. So your Scry might have scried you some bad cards away. Now you draw 2 different cards that are better, or maybe it's just fine. Either way, totally fine. You then may reveal a giant card from your hand, and when you do, Invasion of the Giants deals 2 damage to target opponent or planeswalker. So randomly dome your opponent by being like, hey, I got this giant in my hand. It's fine. Invasion of the Giants notably does curve into Agar pretty nicely, where you basically go turn 2 Invasion, scry into your Agar, maybe you just already had it, and then turn 3 reveal the Agar, and then cast the Agar and deal 2 to your opponent, or somehow to their planeswalker. Though, if they have a planeswalker, you probably have problems. And then lastly, the next giant spell you cast costs 2 less to cast. And now, while this mode is obviously very specific, you might have an expensive giant in your hand that you revealed. And so that cost reduction means that you're like, 7 mana giant only costs 5, or your 6 mana giant only costs 4, which actually lets this happen on curve, which is pretty good. Again, this card, extremely niche, extremely specific. I would never first pick this, but if you are in the Giants deck already and you wind up getting past this card, or you open it in like pack 3 when you're already solidly the Giants deck, then it's probably very good. But you would never in a million years take this pack 1, pick 1 and try to force it. Hey, welcome back, Cam. Onto Carder Doomscourge. 4 mana, 4/3. Already a pretty good rate. When it enters the battlefield until your next turn, creatures you Yeah, creatures your opponents control. Oh, you went and just brewed that immediately. You gotta love it. I see I sent you down a bit of a, what, a squirrel hole, I guess it is, really. Um, until your next turn, creatures your opponent control attack each combat if able, and attack a player other than you if able. So the downside to this card is that this mode is meaningless. The downside of this card is that, sorry, I got distracted by chat there. Is that if you're playing like 1v1, if you're playing in a regular game of limited or even brawl, this doesn't do anything because this ability is actually just, it's not keyworded, but this is essentially just goad, which is to say that yeah, you all have to attack, but you can't attack me. You have to attack like him or something, or them. That doesn't work if you're the only legal person to attack. So like they're just going to attack you anyway. So that's not great, honestly. It just forces your opponent's creatures to attack you. It is pretty much cooler in EDH when you have the option to like point people in different directions. But then also notably, whenever an attacking creature dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So the idea is you force creatures to attack into you or into their opponents, and then people block and a bunch of chaos happens, and then you gain life and they lose life for that happening. So the idea is you're essentially just attempting to sow chaos on the battlefield of this thing. I think this card is pretty interesting. Like the raid is a 4-mana 4/3 with like reasonable upside is honestly not terrible. And it punishes attackers and blockers like pretty badly, or it punishes people attacking you pretty badly. It's sort of weird because again, these effect, like the first effect doesn't really work in limited, and the second effect only works if you're being defensive, which like this color pair doesn't really feel like it wants to be. So I'm a little bit confused as to like what this card is trying to do, but it's a bunch of neat abilities, and I'm curious to see what people might do with this. It's probably good enough in limited just because it's a solidly statted creature. I don't know if it's good enough in Brawl because again, you're still missing, like, you really don't want your commander to like not have one of its abilities be relevant, if at all possible. And then in EDH it might be good just based on the ability to goad. I can see this like in a Grixis deck as well, where you have like Thassa and you can just blink this every turn and just keep goading your opponents forever and no one can ever attack you. Like that sounds kind of sweet. Notably, this is also whenever an attacking creature dies, it's not a creature that it was attacking you. So if a creature attacks your opponent, they block, and then they block and it dies, you'll still lose the life and they'll gain the life and they'll lose the life. Again, yeah, this ability only works in multiplayer when there are actually opponents other than you. It literally is just a blank. It's just flavor text in 1v1, which is weird to me. But again, this tells me that they designed this more with EDH in mind than with limited. Which is okay. Not every card can be great in limited. Next one is Carter's Vicious Return. So also 4 mana, featuring the same Carter, incidentally. You may sack a creature. When you do, Carter's Vicious Return deals 3 damage to any target. So you've got some random 1/1 lying around. You play this, it ETBs, the chapter goes off, sack your 1/1, deal lightning bolt something or someone. Not bad. Mode 2 is each player discards a card. So again, that includes you, which means that you have to have a card you're prepared to discard. But it does get your opponent as well. And then the final mode is return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, put a 1/1 counter on it, and it gains haste till the next turn. So the reason that this is actually pretty good, because what happens is that it gives you 2 chances to basically set up your 3rd chapter. So on this one, you sack a creature. So maybe you sack a creature and it's okay. And then guess what? By the time you get back to chapter 3, you actually get to buy that creature back with a counter and it has haste. You just get to get in there right away. That's pretty good. The second ability, maybe the creature you sacked wasn't that good, so you didn't want to do that. But you've got like a cool like dragon in hand or something, or like, like some giant in hand where it's like, like a 7 mana 6/6 or something, right? You can discard it to the second mode because you weren't going to cast your 7 mana 6/6, not soon anyway. And then on turn 3, you actually just get your 7 mana 6/6 back, except now it's a 7/7 with haste, and you didn't have to pay any mana for it. So like that's kind of the combo here, is you're sort of like hurting yourself a little bit, but you're setting up for this big payoff turn on chapter 3, which seems pretty cool. I think you are thinking most likely of the Eldest Reborn, if I were to take a guess, because that is very reminiscent of this card. All right, our first mythic gold card, which is Kaya the Inexorable. So 5 mana for a 5 loyalty planeswalker. Her +1 puts a ghost form counter on up to 1 target non-token creature. It gains whenever this creature dies or is put into exile, or return it to its owner's hand and create a 1/1 spirit token with flying. So this works either with your creatures or with your opponent's creatures. You mostly probably want to do it on your own creatures, the idea being that instead of dying, you get a spirit, and then you get to recast that creature at a later time. But there might be reasons that you want to put a creature in your opponent's hand. You never know. And it doesn't specifically say your opponent or you. -3 is just straight up exile target non-land permanent. Like, again, not just very not flashy, but very strong. Just like, she even still saves with 2 loyalty, but yeah, just get something dead. Get it gone. Get it gone. And that's pretty good. And then your emblem for her is at the beginning of your upkeep, you may cast a legendary spell from your hand, from your graveyard, or from among cards you own in exile without paying its mana cost. So I don't really understand how this ability synergizes with her other abilities. It's just sort of a generically strong ability. But it is pretty good. It is pretty good. Oh wow, yeah, legendary spell. It's not actually legendary creature, so you can actually, I mean, obviously you need to be in a deck that was Izzet at that point, or not Izzet, I mean Esper at that point, but that is strong. So like, yeah, the ability is weird because it really doesn't synergize with her previous abilities unless you exile your own permanent for no particular reason, but like that's not very synergistic either. But it is a strong ult. Like, just casting things for free every turn is just good. So, and I would definitely first pick this card. Like, it's a mythic, and it's got, like, a bunch of strong abilities on it. You're always going to first pick this card. It's just very good. King Narfi's Betrayal. So this is, have I seen this one? Oh, I have. This was actually quite cool. This one's quite cool. So, 3 mana. When it ETBs, each player mills 4 cards. Then you may exile a creature or planeswalker from each graveyard. So, usually it'll be, like, 1 from yours and 1 from theirs. Until the end of turn, you may cast spells from among, and then chapters 2 and 3 basically pay you off for chapter 1. And they say until end of turn, you may cast spells from among cards exiled with King Narfi's Betrayal, and you may spend mana as well as mana of any color to activate those spells. So in those 4 cards that you've milled, or in cards that were just already in the yard, you get to exile one of theirs, one of yours, and then you get to just recast those. And you're not constrained by mana costs in terms of colors, because even if your opponent's like a red-green deck, you still get to cast it. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I'm not convinced that this card is very first pickable. Like, it's not guaranteed to actually do anything reasonable, but it is a powerful build around. But it is not a card that I would first pick, I don't think. So that's where I'm at on that one. Pull the Forge Master. Whenever another non-token creature you control dies, if it was enchanted or equipped, then return it to its owner's hand. So basically, if you have a non-token creature, it's basically death-proof as long as it's equipped. You just bounce it back, kind of similar to this Ghost Form counter business. Then on the flip side, creature tokens you control that are enchanted or equipped also get +1/+1. This card does a lot of really weird things. They're sort of like, they reward you for having things enchanted or equipped, obviously, but the fact that it's like very different between what the tokens get and what the creatures get is like, or then the non-tokens get, is kind of weird. So 2 mana 2/2, I'm not in love with it, especially because it requires you to be playing a bunch of enchantments and equipments, and like none of those are good. So I would just steer the hell away from, like, I would just steer clear of this, frankly. I just think that this is a trap. In limited, it might be able to do some cool things in constructed. Like, it's probably pretty good in like Depala Historic Brawl or something, or things like that, because it is a dwarf and it cares about shit. I don't know. It's fine. Coma, Cosmo Serpent. Cam, are you still here? This one's for you. This one's for you. So, Coma Cosmo Serpent is a 7 mana 6/6. 3 green, blue. So it's not easy to cast. You ain't splashing this thing. But if you can cast it, it is sweet. So this spell cannot be countered. So the good thing is that, yes, you are paying 7 mana, but you can play this with impunity. You will not get countered. It is happening. This is resolving. At the beginning of each upkeep, and this is important, each upkeep matters because that includes your opponents. This is not each of your upkeeps. Create a 3/3 blue serpent creature token named Coma's Coil. Also, I don't know if you've seen these yet, Cam, but they're really cool. There's your Coma's Coil token right here. It's pretty cool, honestly. I like this card a lot. Yep, definitely some shades of Tendershoot Dryad in here. For sure. It also makes 3/3 straight up, so it doesn't have to. So that's like already pretty good. Like, so you basically, by the time, if you untap with this card, you've literally already gotten 12 power out of it. So you got a 3/3 on your opponent's turn, and then you get a 3/3 on your upkeep. And then on top of that, and again, really as long as the first trigger resolves, it's reasonably difficult to kill Coma. Because the first one that you make on your opponent's turn, you would then have the ability, if you need to sacrifice it to give Coma indestructible. That is the mythic rare symbol, yes. Yeah, this card is definitely a mythic rare. It is a bomb. It is a windmill slam. This card is really freaking good. You should play it all the time. In your limited stuff. And I do think that it's a very cool brawl commander, and I honestly think it might be a very cool commander. You don't have a lot of serpents to work with is the biggest downside, as Back to the Fuchsia is well aware. But if you can make it work, it is sweet. It's a hell of a combo with like things like opposition and intruder alarm and things like that. And then yeah, the other one is tap target permanent, so it's like has its own little opposition thing going on as well. But you have to sack it instead. No, very, very good card, an absolute bomb in limited, and honestly a very interesting, cool build around commander. Like, I actually really like this card because it's the first time in a while that they haven't just printed this like herp derp generically good goes into every Simic deck Simic commander. Like, this is actually like a commander that is good, but you really need to like build around it, and it forces you to build in a different direction than you would probably build your average Simic deck and everything. So I think it's super cool on that count. Maja. Yep, Maja sounding like Tristani is definitely not unreasonable. So this was a little weird. I had a chat with a couple of my friends about this because we were trying to figure out if this card was like interesting enough for Commander. My gut is it's not. Like, you're probably just better off playing Tristani for the exact same mana cost, basically. But it's not a bad card, honestly. I don't know that I'd go all in on blue on white green as a first pick with this card or anything, because it's also like not even that easily splashable. At least you definitely want to be white. You might be able to splash green for it, but it might also not be worth that. We'd have to see. So the first and foremost, other creatures you control get 1/1. So notably, this is a 2/3, no matter what else happens. Then whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, create a 1/1 white human creature token. So of course it's technically a 2/2 because the passive buff still applies. But it walks this weird line between like kind of landfall, kind of tokens, and they're a little bit disjointed themes. It's kind of like a Scoot Mob, but it's worse than Scoot Mob. It's, I don't know, or a Scoot Swarm rather. I don't think it's terrible, but I do think that it's like trying to do these two very disparate things. Like the landfall trigger just weirds me out. It would honestly just make more sense to me if it was like, I don't even know what it would need to be. Like, I don't know. The landfall just weirds me out. It feels out of place on this card. Like, it doesn't seem tied thematically to anything. Not a first pick card for sure, but again, if you are in those colors, it does do a lot of strong things. But I don't think you're supposed to be first picking this. Morite. I'm gonna go with Morite of the Frost. Morite. 5 mana for a 0/0 changeling shapeshifter. Legendary snow creature, notably. You may have Morite of the Frost enter the battlefield with a copy of any permanent you control. You control, notably, but also any permanent, notably. So it's like a slightly more restrictive Clever Impersonator. Except that it's legendary and snow in addition to its other types. And if it's a creature, it enters with 2 additional +1/+1 counters. So it can come in as a buffed copy of another creature or just clone any other permanent you have that you feel like. Weirdly enough, that includes lands. It doesn't say non-land. So you could pay 5 mana to make a snow land. That would be a thing that you could do. I think it's a cool card. I think it's very interesting. It's a new, decent, cool commander for like Clone Tribal too, if you're into that. I mean, I'm not entirely sure what you would do with that, Emilio, but like, sure, yeah, fair. Anyway, I think this card is cool, but again, not a first pickable card in my opinion. Just good if you're already in those colors. All right, Narfi, Betrayer King. So that is Narfi, of course, of King Narfi's Betrayal fame. So it's a 5 mana 4/3. and it gives other snow and zombie creatures you control. So if it's a snow creature, it gets the +1/+1, and if it's a zombie creature, it's +1/+1. Obviously, the tie together is him. I don't know how many creatures. Like, I don't know what the overlap between zombies and snow creatures actually is in the real world, but whatever. And then it has the ability to return from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped for 3 snow mana. So it's like a weird lord that comes back pretty easily. I'm inclined to think this card is pretty good if you have the snow mana support for it, frankly. I don't know. I don't know if this card is good or not. It's like a 5 mana 4/3, which is pretty unimpressive. If the Lord matters and you have enough snow mana, then it's probably good. But another one of those cards where I'm just like definitely not trying to first pick this at all. So yeah, we're gonna keep moving past that. Again, if you're in blue black already, this is probably great, especially if you're in blue black snow. But it's not worth going all in initially just by itself, I don't believe. All right, Nico Aris, another planeswalker. This is actually a new planeswalker, the other new planeswalker along with Tavar. Also the first non-binary planeswalker, which is pretty hype. So this one was kind of weird because so they come in with their base loyalty is 3. So they're at base a 3 mana 3 loyalty planeswalker. However, you can pay any amount of X into it to make Nico Aris enter to create any number of shard tokens, which are basically like super clues. So basically they're enchantments, not artifacts, and then when you can crack them for 2 to scry 1, then draw a card. All right, take it easy, Cam. Thanks for dropping by. See you next time. Yeah, glad you were as well. So this part is like kind of cool, honestly. Like these shard tokens are very strong, I would say. Like the ability to scry 1, then draw a card. Like I said, they're super clues. But you do need to pay for them, right? Like if you want to make 2 of them, this costs 5 instead of 3, and that's a big difference in the cost. But in any case, let's see what else they do. Up to 1 target creature you control can't be blocked this turn, and then whenever that creature deals damage this turn, return it to its owner's hand. So obviously the first clause here is that it makes something unblockable, so you can get in for some amount of damage guaranteed. The return to its owner's hand is interesting because that is not a may. You have to do that. So if you get in with that unblocked creature and it deals damage, it will bounce back to your hand, which might be bad because then you have to recast the damn thing. However, it was pointed out that this is quite interesting with a lot of the dual-faced cards, the middle dual-faced cards, because you can basically cast them on their creature side, attack, get in for damage if you're interested, and then you can buy them back and then potentially redeploy them as their non-creature side if that seems appropriate in the moment. So you get a little bit of extra play out of your modal dual face cards, at least in this color pair, which is kind of a neat idea. Also, it lets you rebuy ETB abilities and things like that. It's definitely a very unique ability because it's upside and downside, but you might be able to mitigate the downside and turn it into another upside. So it's pretty cool that way. The -1, that's the +1. The first -1, because there's no actual alt on this one. On Nico, it's just a small plus and then 2 small minuses. So the first one is deal 2 damage to target tapped creature for each card you've drawn this turn. So this notably synergizes with the shard tokens, of course, right? Because you draw your 1 card per turn, guaranteed. And then if you've even so much as cracked a single other shard, you've now drawn 2, and that deals 4 damage to a tapped creature instead of 2 damage. And if you somehow crack 2, then now you're dealing 6. So that scales up pretty nicely. And it's very white as well, right? Like dealing damage to tapped things is a very white ability. So that's pretty cool. And then the minus is just create more shard tokens. So maybe you didn't get the chance to pay a lot of shard tokens when you cast it because you didn't have enough mana, but you still get to make shard tokens when it ETBs or like off of the card itself. Altogether, a very interesting card. I think it's probably first pickable in limited. I'm not 100% sure about that because it's not like extremely powerful. Like when it enters the battlefield, it's not one of those like, oh god, I have to deal with this type of planeswalkers. But it is cool. And I'd certainly probably first pick it again just early in the season just to like figure out what it does, if nothing else. There are a few, but they are all in red, notably. So you'd already need to be 3 colors, and like 3 colors is probably not where you want to be at in Kaldheim or in any limited set, really, barring a few very special exceptions. Moving on to Nico Defies Destiny. So we got 3 mana. You gain 2 life. So the first chapter. Okay, I'm going to go right ahead and say, like, whatever. I'll read the chapter first. So chapter 1 is you gain 2 life for each foretold card you own in exile. So that means that you've paid the 2 generic to exile it, but you haven't actually cast them from exile yet. So you gain 2 life for each card in exile that's been foretold. The next mode is add a blue and a white, but you can only spend that mana to either foretell cards or cast spells that have been foretold. So it's limited in that way. And then the last mode is return target card with foretell from your graveyard to your hand. So this is obviously just like, hey, guess what? White blue really wants to foretell things, right? I don't think it's good, frankly. I think this card is just bad. Like the first chapter, like you maybe gain 2 life, 4 if you're like extremely lucky, but that also means you're not casting it on curve. Like basically this is going to make casting your first foretell spell easier, right? Because you're going to foretell 1 card on turn 2. Then on turn 3, you're going to gain 2 life for having that card in exile. Then on turn 4, you gain 2 bonus mana, which you will then use to probably cast your foretold spell, assuming it's proactive and not reactive. And then on turn 3, especially if it's like like an instant or a sorcery and it guaranteed already went to your graveyard, or it was a creature and it died, then you get to buy that spell back. So like, it obviously works really well with foretell cards, but it's so niche and like doesn't generate any amount of board advantage or anything. I just feel like this card is like not doing anything. I would strongly advise staying away from this card unless the blue-white foretell deck winds up being absurd for some reason that I'm missing. But I'm not a fan. I am a fan of the Raven's Warning though, so let's talk about that one. 3 mana as well for another blue-white enchantment. This one creates a 1/1 blue bird token creature with flying when it enters when it hits chapter 1, aka when it enters the battlefield. And then you gain 2 life. So for 3 mana, you get a 1/1 and gain 2. Not amazing by any stretch, but solid as a start. The next mode is what makes this really kind of worth it. Whenever 1 or more creatures you control with flying deal combat damage to a player, look at that player's hand and draw a card. So you get to draw an additional card by hitting them, and you get to get the information of what's in your opponent's hand. And as much as that doesn't sound incredible, it is a powerful ability to be able to just know what your opponent's doing. Because it means that you can really craft a game plan against what you're doing. It's a big part of the reason why effects like Thoughtseize are powerful. I mean, obviously you get to take a card as well, but then you also have that residual information of what's the rest of your hand look like. But even cards like Jataxian Probe, like that card got banned because it was basically like too efficient. It didn't get banned because you got to look at your opponent's hand. It got banned because it was free. Yeah, it's Peak, Opt, Jataxian Probe, whatever you want to call it, right? It's good, is the bottom line. I don't know if there's a foretell card that buys this back. There might be. If you can like kind of like loop this and go off, that would be sort of cool. But that also sounds like doing a lot of work. Maybe you can do that in like a brawl deck, but I don't think you're doing that in limited. Like if you're doing that, it means your opponent's just doing nothing. The final mode is a little bit of a weird one. It doesn't actually work, unfortunately, in Brawl or EDH, but it does work in Limited. So it says you may own a card. You may put a card you own from outside the game on top of your library. So basically, what this says. So for the purposes of Limited, cards you own from outside the game are the cards that are in your sideboard, the ones that are in your pool, but that you didn't actually put into your deck. And so what it means is you can basically potentially, if it's relevant, go look in your sideboard for a card that you think might be nice to draw. Because sometimes you have like a 6 mana 5/5, right? And you don't really want to play a 6 mana 5/5 in your deck. But it wouldn't be bad to just randomly have a 6 mana 5/5 that you didn't have to include in your deck. I don't like personally the fact that it goes to the top of library. Like you're essentially just like determining your next draw is going to be a sideboard card, which is like kind of sketchy. I feel this card should just go straight to your hand personally, but whatever. They clearly thought that would be too powerful, I guess. The bottom line is, again, I think this card is neat. And again, if I am blue and white, I will probably always play this card, but I do not believe this card is a first pickable card. All right, next one is Serulf Realm Eater. Yeah, also possibly that, Emilio. Serulf Realm Eater. So this is a 3 mana 3/3. Whenever a permanent an opponent controls is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on Serulf. At the beginning of your upkeep, if Serulf has 1 or more counters on it, you may remove all of them. And if you do, exile, notably exile, each other non-land permanent with converted mana cost less than or equal to the number of counters removed this way. So, and that's going to take your stuff down and your opponent's stuff down unconditionally. But you can also just let this build up as long as you want. You don't ever need to do that, but you can like let this build up and do a huge beat stick, and then like take a bunch of counters off and like exile everything with converted mana cost like 5 or less. Except you get to keep Sarulf, which is really cool. I definitely think this card is powerful. I'm not 100% sure if it's first pick powerful, but if it isn't, it's damn close. I do think it's pretty good. For me, it's actually shades of Plague Boiler. But there is a bit of a Forgotten Ancient going on as well. But Plague Boiler is what this reminds me of more than anything. I think this card is a high pick, and it might be a first pick out of certain packs, but it's not a Windmill Slam or anything. It's not a bomb, but it is good. It is very good. Next one is Showdown of the Skalds. Mode 1 is exile the top 4 cards of your library. Until the end of your next turn, you may play those cards. That's just really good. This is one of the first spoilers we got, and this card is just really good. If anyone's ever played with Escape from Escape to the Wilds, which incidentally got banned in Standard, although that one got banned for a couple of other reasons as well. But if you've ever played with Escape to the Wilds, this card does a very good impression of that. Like, this is essentially 4 mana draw 4 in red-white, which is, like, not a thing that EDH/Brawl ever gets to do. This card is legitimately very strong just for Mode 1. And you do get until the end of your next turn to play it. So even if you tapped out to play this on this turn, you get the next turn to play those cards. And that includes lands, too. So it might make you a land drop and get to your 5th mana, and then you can play like a 2-drop and a 3-drop or something. It's pretty cool. And that's assuming you're playing this on curve. If you play this later in the game, you'll have tons of mana. You can probably cast all 4 cards. Whenever you cast a spell this turn, put a 1/1 counter on target creature you control. That's modes 2 and 3. So that mode is kind of just like whatever, but it basically just makes your stuff get bigger, which is cool. Like, it's not crazy powerful or anything, but it's like totally fine. But the main mode you're playing this for is just mode 1, and then this is just gravy. Again, I don't think you're first picking this in limited, because the abilities are pretty marginal in terms of like affecting the board. But I'm very excited about this card for Brawl and for Commander. But I don't think it's a very good limited card. I would probably pass on it. All right, we're getting near the end. I have to pee really badly, but that's okay. I'm gonna muscle through the rest of the gold cards before I do that. So the next one is Sevilla Ice Shaper. So it's a 3-mana 2/4. I've heard a lot of people refer to this as fixed Golos, which isn't entirely inaccurate. So for 3 and tap, you can make a colorless snow artifact token named Icy Manalith, which is funny because there's already Manalith, that has tap, add 1 mana of any color. But it's a snow permanent, notably. So it's a callback to this card. So this is Manalith, which is just 3 mana, tap for any 1 color. So this makes Manaliths, but they're Icy Manaliths, which means they make snow mana of any color, which is cool. And you do have to pay the 3. So it's like you're literally just casting Manaliths, but you're generating them out of thin air, which is kind of funny. I think the token for them is here somewhere too, and it's like kind of a cool token. Yeah, here's your Icy Manalith. Looks pretty cool. I like this card. Anywho. And then its other ability is for a whopping 8 mana, including a green and a red. You can tap it, look the top 4 cards of your library, and then you may cast a spell from among them without paying its mana cost. Put the rest on the bottom in a random order. Now take a look at this. Now, granted, this is an uncommon, but take a look at this. This card exists. So with this card, this one ETBs and automatically finds you an extra mana, which is basically like the same as this mode. So for 6 mana, you get to make an extra mana total, because 3, and then you wait the next turn. For 5 mana, and you don't even have to wait a turn to tap the ability, you get to just put a land into play right away. And it's any land you want. For 8 mana, you get to look at the top 4 cards of your library, cast 1 spell without paying its mana cost. Cast 1 spell, notably, too. So you can't even play lands off of this ability. For 7 mana, mind you, it's Wooburg, but still, for 7 mana, you get to take the top 3 cards. So, okay, 1 card less. You may play them all this turn without playing their mana cost. And also it works with lands because it says play. So yeah, this is fixed Golos. This is basically like, this card is broken. This card is stupid. I love this card personally, but I also believe this card probably was a mistake and shouldn't exist for the health of EDH as a format. But either way, that's neither here nor there. It exists. But it is just really sobering to look at this card, consider that this card is still pretty decent, And then consider how much worse than Golos this card is. It just really makes you think. It's pretty weird. Anyway, fine card. Once again, not trying to windmill slam this out of pack 1, pick 1 or anything. You just killed yourself in Mythic, and your opponent scooped in response. Nice. Good guy opponent. Or good person opponent, I guess. Lucky you. So yeah, Savella I think is very good, but not worth pack 1 pick 1ing. But again, if you are in red-green, you are probably going to pick Savella. Next one. 3 Seasons. There are a lot, notably there are also a lot of sagas where chapter 1 is just mill some cards. Like, you could probably build some sort of Muldrotha saga deck with like all of the like mill X cards sagas, because they exist. There are a lot of them, as it turns out. So the 3 Seasons. Chapter 1, mill 3 cards. Literally just you mill 3 cards. Chapter 2, return up to 2 target snow permanent cards from your graveyard to your hand, which is nice. So again, obviously you're trying to play this in a snow tribal deck where the cards that you milled are snow cards, so you actually get to draw them on a 1-turn delay. And then chapter 3, choose 3 cards in each graveyard and then shuffle them back into their libraries. And notably, this is choose 3 cards in each graveyard, so you don't get to not choose your opponents. They do have to shuffle cards back. But it can be cool because you can shuffle like crappy cards that your opponent spent, like lands that have gotten into their deck, or like a bad combat trick. You can shuffle those back into their deck and make their draws worse. Meanwhile, you can like shuffle like your 3 best cards back into your library. You have to be careful though, because if you like just killed your opponent's bomb and it's one of the 3 creatures that are in their deck or in their graveyard, you just now recycled your opponent's bomb back into their deck. Pause to check. Thank you. And now you have to deal with that again somewhere down the line. So it's not completely scot-free. It's an interesting card. Again, not at all a card I'm trying to first pick. I don't even know if this card is good and limited, honestly. Like it's a cute engine-y card, but it just doesn't do anything. The next one is the Trickster God's Heist. So chapter 1 is you may exchange control of 2 target creatures. So like, hey, that's a nice 5/5. Be a shame if you took a 1/1 from me and I got your 5/5 instead. That's like already pretty good as an uncommon for 4 mana. Like, I think this is probably like the second best saga, straight up. And it's funny because it's another uncommon one. Like, I think all of the rare sagas are worse than this and the red-green one. Or I mean the black-green one. Maybe I'm like forgetting one that's pretty good. But like, generally speaking, I think I would rather maybe Furia's Retribution. Retribution might genuinely be better than those. That card is very good. But like, this is ridiculous. Like, this is already basically, yeah, so it's a 4 mana switcheroo. You just get to like take somebody's cool creature and give them your not cool creature, and that's just permanent. Then you may exchange control of 2 target non-basic non-creature permanents. So like you can either exchange like 2 non-basic lands, because it does specifically say non-basic. So you can't exchange basic lands, but you can exchange non-basic lands. But you also can't exchange creatures a second time. But it's like, so like I've got this like, I don't know, this random artifact lying around, and you've got this like cool enchantment lying around, or like maybe like they have a cool saga that's like on its 2nd chapter and I want to get the 3rd chapter off of them. So I can trade my saga for like their saga or something. And like my saga's like the last mode doesn't matter that much, but their saga's last mode is like really good. So like lots of cool things you can do with that card. I genuinely think this card is really cool. And then finally, target player loses 3 life and you gain 3 life. So like probably the most underwhelming mode of the 3, but again, the first 2 modes are very good, and the first mode is definitely the best. So this is just sort of gravy on top. This is just a really good saga and a really good card. This again, I believe, is a very first pickable card as far as I can tell. I would happily pick this first. All right, next we have Vega the Watcher, which definitely I think is my winner for like coolest options available to a commander. So this card is a 3 mana 2/2 flyer, already like pretty solid. And then it says whenever you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, draw a card. So of course the obvious level 1 here is this works really well with foretell. Whenever you foretell a card, it basically cantrips. So whenever you cast a card that's been foretold, draw a card. That's already like pretty good, especially because we know that blue-white is the foretell color pair. But if you consider like expanding this beyond that to like EDH and even Brawl, like you have mechanics like Flashback, Unearth, Escape, what else am I thinking? Retrace. There's all kinds of these like castings from your graveyard or from exile mechanics, and this works with all of them, which is I think really, really cool. Lots of potential ways that you can like, at the end of the day, like all it's doing is making you draw a bunch of cards. You still have to figure out how to like win. But having like this really cool card draw engine in your command zone that like rewards you for doing these sort of like off the wall things. Rebound is another one that worked well with this. I just think it's a really cool design and a really cool sort of engine that you can try to like abuse. And then our last gold card is another saga. This one is called Waking the Trolls. This one's weird. It costs a lot of mana for like not a particularly strong set of cards, but we'll see what happens. So for 6 mana, destroy target land. I guess it's not great. It's not great, but it's fine. For on the second chapter, put target land card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. So like, haha, you see, you destroy your opponent's land and then you get your opponent's land to your side, I guess. And then the chapter 3 is choose target opponent if they control fewer lands than you. So again, you've been building towards this, right? You've taken them down a land, you've gone up a land. So in theory, you should have a land discrepancy by now. If they control fewer lands than you, then you get a number of 4/4 green troll warrior creature tokens with trample equal to the difference. So basically, if I have 6 lands, or let's say I have 8 lands because it's 2 turns after waking the trolls, but maybe I missed a land drop. So let's say I have 8 lands. My opponent was on 5 lands. They went down to 4, and then maybe they played another land drop somewhere in there. So I have 8 lands, and they have 5 lands. The final mode would actually let me put 4 troll tokens with trample onto the battlefield. That actually is pretty sick, but it's a really long game payoff on a card that's already very expensive on its front. Like, this literally isn't happening until hypothetically turn 8. And that's, like, at the earliest. Well, no, I mean, you could ramp, I guess. But, like, I don't know. It's a long, long game to play. And you also have to, like, hope that your opponent's, like, missing land drops and you're making your land drops and everything. It's not bad, but it's definitely not a first pick. It's a decent card if you're already red-green, once again, but I'm not trying to force it. Okay, and that takes us to the end of our gold card.